My German Shepherd had survived gunfire, explosions, and the darkest night of my Navy career without ever making a sound like that. But the moment Echo stepped inside my dead uncle's abandoned cider house, he began to howl at the stone floor. Beneath it, we found a hidden room, my missing father's final recording, and evidence that one of the most respected men in North Carolina had been stealing land from military families for decades. Before our story is over, the orchard will burn. A child will be trapped inside the flames, and Echo will risk his life to bring both of us home. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your support helps us continue sharing powerful stories about veterans, loyal dogs, second chances, and the quiet courage that can change a life. The first time Echo warned me about the floor beneath the old cider house, I told him there was nothing down there. I was wrong. By sunrise, half the orchard would be burning. A child would be trapped behind a wall of flame, and the most respected man in our county would be standing beside the fire trucks, watching the evidence of his crimes turn to ash. But that night, none of us knew what was coming. All I knew was that my German Shepherd had placed both front paws against a cracked stone floor and begun to howl. Echo did not howl, not during thunderstorms, not when coyotes moved through the woods, not even when gunfire cracked close enough to shake dirt from our helmets overseas. He had been trained to stay quiet when fear made other animals lose control. Yet there he stood in the abandoned cider house, his black muzzle pointed toward the floor, releasing a sound so low and mournful that it seemed to come from beneath the earth itself. I raised my lantern and studied the stones. They looked ordinary. Old gray slabs, dark mortar, decades of apple stains and engine oil. Then Echo scratched at one narrow seam. The stone moved. Only a fraction of an inch, but I saw it. Cold air touched my face. Not mountain air, air from somewhere sealed below us. I knelt beside him and pressed my palm against the gap. Something was down there. Something my uncle had hidden. And someone else already knew about it. 3 weeks earlier, I had been sleeping behind a 24-hour laundromat in eastern Tennessee. Calling it sleep would be generous. I had closed my eyes, but I never truly slept anymore. Echo lay across the back seat of my truck with his head resting between the front seats. Every few minutes he opened one amber eye to make sure I was still breathing. The truck was an old Ford with rust above the wheel wells and a passenger window that would not roll up all the way. Cold rain slipped through the gap and tapped against a towel I had wedged into the door. The parking lot lights flickered. Dryers turned behind the laundromat windows, filling the darkness with a steady mechanical rhythm. Round and round, round and round. It reminded me of helicopter blades. That was the problem with quiet sounds. They never stayed quiet for long. A dryer became a helicopter, a car door became a rifle bolt. A shopping cart rolling over pavement became a wounded man being dragged across gravel. I closed my eyes again. The mountain came back immediately. Not the Blue Ridge Mountains. A different mountain on the other side of the world. Dust covered my teeth. A radio screamed in my ear. Someone shouted my name. Then came the blast. I opened my eyes so fast that my shoulder struck the driver's window. Echo was already beside me. He pushed his head against my chest and held it there. His breathing was slow, measured. He had done that during my final deployment, whenever I disappeared too far into my own mind. I placed one hand against the thick fur at the back of his neck. "I am here," I whispered. Echo did not move. "I know where I am." That was a lie, but it was a useful one. My name is Jonah Reed. I served with the United States Navy sea, air, and land teams for nearly 2 decades. People hear that and imagine strength. They imagine discipline, courage, and a man who can walk into danger without feeling fear. They do not imagine a 48-year-old veteran sleeping in a truck because the ceiling of an apartment feels too close. They do not imagine a man who checks every doorway twice. They do not imagine him waking with his hands wrapped around the throat of an enemy who has been dead for years. The truth was simple. I had survived every place that tried to kill me. Coming home was the part I could not figure out. Echo had survived with me. He had been trained to locate explosives, track human scent, and move through darkness without making a sound. During our last operation together, he found a pressure plate buried beneath a layer of loose stone. That discovery saved 6 men. It did not save the 7th. Senior Chief Aaron Bell died before the evacuation helicopter arrived. He was my closest friend. He was also the reason I stopped wearing my uniform. I had made the decision that put him on that ridge. People told me the intelligence was wrong. They told me the weather had changed. They told me no leader could have predicted what happened. None of that mattered at 3 in the morning. At 3 in the morning, Aaron still called my name. Echo lifted his head when someone knocked on the windshield. My hand moved toward the folding knife beside the center console. An elderly woman stood outside holding a white envelope. Her silver hair was tucked beneath a clear rain hood. She wore the blue sweater of the laundromat staff and looked more annoyed than frightened. I lowered the window as far as it would go. Rain struck my face. "You Jonah Reed?" she asked. I studied her before answering. "Who wants to know? A man inside has been waiting for you." Echo rose behind me. The woman glanced at him. "He does not look friendly." "He is friendly." Echo gave a quiet growl. I looked back at him. "Usually." The woman held out the envelope. "The man said to give you this if you would not come inside." I took it but did not open it. "What man?" "Gray suit. Expensive shoes. Looks like he has never folded his own laundry." That description did not help. I climbed out of the truck. Echo followed. The woman stepped back when all 90 pounds of him landed beside me. "He goes where I go," I said, "as long as he does not eat anybody." No promises. Inside, the laundromat smelled of detergent, wet clothing, and burnt coffee. A man sat alone near the vending machines. He was younger than I expected, perhaps 35, with dark hair and a leather briefcase resting between his shoes. His gray suit was too clean for the room. He stood when he saw me. "Mr. Reed?" I did not shake his hand. "Who are you?" "Daniel Mercer. I represent the estate of your late uncle, Samuel Reed." The name hit me harder than it should have. I had not spoken to Samuel in 19 years. He was my father's older brother and the last living member of my family. At least he had been. When did he die? 6 weeks ago. I looked away. A row of dryers turned behind him, round and round. No one had called me. No one ever called until there was paperwork involved. Daniel opened his briefcase and removed. "Your uncle named you as his sole beneficiary. I think you have the wrong Jonah Reed. You were born in Asheville, North Carolina. Your father was Thomas Reed. Your mother was Kathleen Reed." Echo stood against my right leg. Daniel continued. "You attended Cedar Falls High School before enlisting at 17 with parental consent. That information is not difficult to find. Your uncle also mentioned the scar beneath your left elbow. He said you got it falling from the roof of the cider house when you were 9. My arm seemed to ache at the memory. I had not thought about that roof in years. I remembered sun-warmed wood beneath my hands, bees circling fallen apples. My uncle shouting from below that I was going to break my neck. Then my father laughing. My father had not laughed often. "What did Samuel leave me?" I asked. Daniel placed the paper on a folding table. An orchard outside the town of Briar Glen, just over 100 acres. A stone farmhouse. Several agricultural buildings. Water rights, equipment, and the cider house. I laughed once. It sounded bitter even to me. "He left me an orchard." "Yes." "Why?" Daniel hesitated. "That is not explained in the will." "Then sell it." "I cannot." "Why not?" "Your uncle included a condition." Of course he had. Samuel had believed every gift required a lesson. "What condition?" "You must personally occupy the property for 30 consecutive days before you may sell, divide, or transfer it." I stared at him. Daniel removed a second envelope. "This was found in your uncle's desk. It is addressed to you." The paper was thick and yellowed at the edges. My name was written in Samuel's uneven block lettering. I did not open it. I have not seen him since I was 29. "I know. You know why?" "No." "Then do not look at me like this is some kind of family reunion." Daniel lowered his voice. "I am only carrying out his instructions." Echo sniffed the envelope. His ears shifted forward. That caught my attention. Echo had inspected thousands of objects. He reacted to chemical traces, human scent, and changes too small for me to notice. He touched his nose to the lower corner of the envelope and pulled back. "What is it?" I asked. Daniel looked confused. "Is something wrong?" I turned the envelope over. A dark smear marked the back flap. It might have been oil. It might have been dried mud. Echo sniffed it again, then looked directly at me. He was telling me the scent mattered. "What was my uncle doing before he died?" I asked. Maintaining the orchard, as far as I know. How did he die? Daniel paused. He fell inside the cider house. I felt the room tighten around me. An accident? The county report says so. That was not my question. Daniel closed his briefcase. There were no witnesses. I looked at the envelope again. When do the 30 days begin? When you sign the occupancy acknowledgement at the property. I had nothing holding me in Tennessee. No job, no home, no family. Only a truck, a duffel bag, a dog, and memories that followed us across every state line. An orchard in the mountains was not a future, but it was 30 days beneath an open sky. After that, I could sell it and disappear again. I will go, I said. We left before dawn. Rain followed us east through Knoxville, then thinned as the road began to climb. Echo sat upright in the passenger seat with Samuel's envelope between his paws. Every few miles he lowered his nose and smelled the dark stain. I kept telling myself I was returning for the money. The land could be worth enough to buy a small cabin somewhere in the West. Somewhere empty, somewhere I would not have to explain why I stood with my back against the wall in restaurants. But the closer we came to North Carolina, the more memories surfaced. My mother singing while she cut apples for pie. My father sharpening pruning shears on the porch. Samuel teaching me how to tell whether a storm would cross the ridge or break apart above it. I remembered the orchard in autumn. The trees had seemed endless then. Rows of red and gold fruit rolling down the hillside. I remembered hiding inside the cider house when my father was angry. And I remembered the final morning. My father standing in the kitchen with blood on his shirt. Samuel shouting at him, my mother crying beside the sink. Then my father turning toward me. Go upstairs, Jonah. That was the last order he ever gave me. He disappeared 2 days later. The official story was that Thomas Reed had stolen money from the orchard and run. Samuel believed it. The town believed it. Eventually, my mother believed it too. She died less than a year later. Samuel offered to let me remain at the orchard, but I could not stay in a house where every room whispered my father's name. I enlisted. I never returned. Echo shifted beside me as the mountains rose ahead. The Blue Ridge appeared through the morning mist, dark and familiar. My chest tightened. You feel that? I asked him. He pressed his nose toward the cracked window. Pine, wet earth, wood smoke. For the first time in many years I remembered what home smelled like. We reached Briar Glen shortly after noon. The town was smaller than I remembered. A hardware store stood beside the post office. A white church watched over the main intersection. An American flag moved slowly above the courthouse lawn. Several people turned as my truck passed. In a place like Briar Glen, strangers were noticed. Men who had been gone for 3 decades were noticed more. I stopped at a diner called Mabel's Table because Echo needed water, and I needed coffee strong enough to keep the road from moving beneath me. The moment I entered, conversation softened, not stopped. Softened, that was worse. A waitress with short white hair approached carrying a menu. Her name tag read Clara. Then she looked closely at my face. The menu lowered. Jonah Reed. I did not recognize her. That depends on who is asking. She smiled sadly. Clara Jennings. I went to school with your mother. I remembered the name. My mother had mentioned a Clara who could sing louder than the church organ. I am sorry about Samuel, she said. Thank you. Her eyes moved toward Echo. He yours? We belong to each other. She brought him a metal bowl of water and placed it beside our table. Echo drank, but his eyes continued sweeping the room. Clara poured my coffee. You staying at the orchard? For 30 days, her hand paused above the cup. Then you are selling. That is the plan. A man seated behind me muttered something I could not hear. Clara shot him a warning look. What? I asked. Nothing. What did he say? The man turned in his seat. He wore work clothes and a dark baseball cap. I said Silas will be pleased. Who is Silas? The diner went strangely quiet. Clara set down the coffee pot. Silas Vane, she said. He runs the Mountain Veterans Relief Foundation. That does not answer my question. The man in the cap faced me fully. He has been trying to buy your uncle's orchard for years. Why development? Clara replied. A retreat center. Cabins, therapy trails, housing for wounded veterans. That sounded respectable. Too respectable to explain the tension in the room. And Samuel refused every time I looked from Clara to the man. What are you not telling me? Clara lowered her voice. Your uncle and Silas were friends once. What happened? No one knows for certain. The man in the cap spoke again. Samuel accused him of stealing land from widows. Clara glared at him. That was never proven. The man shrugged. Does not mean it was not true. Echo lifted his head from the water bowl. His eyes fixed on the diner entrance. A bell rang above the door. The man who entered was perhaps 60, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair cut neatly above his collar. He wore a navy overcoat and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to being welcomed. Every face in the diner changed. Some people smiled. Others looked down. Clara straightened Mr. Vane. Silas Vane removed his gloves. Then he saw me. His expression softened with what looked like genuine sympathy. "Jonah Reed," he said, "you have your father's eyes." Echo moved between us before I could answer. Silas stopped. He did not appear frightened. He studied Echo with respect. "A German shepherd," he said. "Military?" "Yes." Silas looked back at me. "And so were you. That information travels quickly. This is a small town." He extended his hand. I left it hanging. Silas slowly lowered it without showing offense. "I was sorry to hear about Samuel," he said. "He was a difficult man, but he mattered to this community." "You tried to buy his land." I did. "Why?" His answer came easily. "My foundation needs room to expand. We have older veterans waiting months for residential care. Your uncle's property has water, privacy, and access to the county road. And now you expect me to sell. I expect nothing." Silas glanced at my worn jacket and the truck visible beyond the window. "But I understand that maintaining an orchard is expensive." Samuel allowed the trees to decline. "The western field has blight. The irrigation pumps are failing. You seem familiar with the property." I helped him more times than he would admit. Echo gave a low sound in his throat. Silas looked down at him. "Your dog does not trust me. He has good judgment." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Silas smiled. "I hope to earn better treatment from both of you." He reached into his coat slowly. Echo's shoulders tightened. Silas noticed and stopped. I nodded once. He removed a business card and placed it on the table. "My private number is on the back. If the farmhouse has no heat, call me. If Echo needs a veterinarian, call me. If you decide to discuss the property, call me." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing." I waited. Samuel became frightened near the end of his life. "Frightened of what?" He never said. Silas looked directly into my eyes. "But he spent many nights inside the old cider house. Be careful in there. The structure is not safe." He walked out. The bell rang. Only after the door closed did the diner seem to breathe again. I looked at Clara. "You trust him?" She wiped a clean spot on the counter that did not need wiping. "Silas paid for my husband's surgery." "That is not what I asked." She met my eyes. "I do not know what to believe anymore." The orchard stood 6 miles outside town at the end of a narrow road lined with bare trees. A rusted iron sign leaned beside the gate, "Reed Orchards." One chain hung loose beneath it. The moment I opened the gate, Echo pushed past me. He stood in the road with his nose raised. Wind moved across the hillside. Hundreds of apple trees stretched toward the ridge, their twisted branches empty beneath the winter sky. Some were dead, others leaned beneath years of neglect. The farmhouse sat near the highest of the property. It was built of gray stone with a deep porch and a chimney broad enough to stand inside. Below it stood a weathered barn, an equipment shed, and the old cider house beside the creek. My hands tightened around the gate. Nothing looked smaller. That surprised me. Childhood places usually shrink when a man returns to them. The orchard had grown, or perhaps I had spent so many years running from it that memory had given it power. Echo trotted through the gate. Then he stopped. His body went still. He was looking downhill at the cider house. The building was longer than I remembered, with stone walls and a steep metal roof darkened by rust. The water wheel beside it had collapsed into the creek. One of the windows was broken. A black opening stared back at us. Later I told him Echo did not move house first. He finally followed, but he kept glancing over his shoulder. A key waited beneath the porch rail exactly where Samuel used to hide it. Inside, the farmhouse smelled of dust, cold stone, and wood smoke that had faded weeks ago. Samuel's boots stood beside the door. His coat hung from a wooden peg. A cup sat upside down beside the kitchen sink. It did not feel like a dead man's house. It felt like a man had stepped outside and forgotten to return. Echo inspected every room. I found firewood beside the stove and started a small flame. Then I opened Samuel's envelope. The The letter contained only 3 sentences. Jonah, I failed your father, and then I failed you. Do not sell the orchard until you know what is beneath it. Trust the dog before you trust any man in Briar Glen. I read the message twice, then a third time there was no explanation. No apology for 19 years of silence, no answer about my father. Echo approached the table and sniffed the dark stain on the envelope again. I rubbed it between my fingers. It smelled faintly of machine grease. And apples, not fresh apples, fermented apples, the smell of the cider house. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned fast. No one was there. Echo moved toward the back door. His ears stood high. Then came the sound, a metallic bang from downhill. Not loud, but deliberate. I extinguished the lamp, took my flashlight, and opened the door. Cold wind moved across the orchard. Echo slipped into the darkness. I followed him between the trees. The cider house grew larger as we descended. Its side door was open. I was certain it had been closed when we arrived. Echo reached the entrance and lowered his body. Search, I whispered. He moved inside. My flashlight swept across the old machinery. A rusted apple press stood beneath the rafters. Wooden barrels lined one wall. Broken glass covered the floor near the window. Then my light found wet footprints. They crossed the stone floor and disappeared behind the press. Someone had been there moments earlier. Echo followed the scent. He circled the machinery once. Then he stopped near the center of the room. He began scratching at a seam between 2 stones. Echo. He scratched harder. Dust rose around his paws. I knelt beside him and examined the floor. One stone was not mortared like the others. A narrow iron ring lay beneath years of dirt. I pulled it clear. The stone lifted less than an inch before something below caught it. Cold air escaped through the opening. Echo shoved his nose toward the gap. Then he recoiled. His fur rose along his spine. From somewhere beneath us came a faint mechanical click. A red light appeared in the darkness below. It blinked once. Then again. An old machine was still running under the cider house. And judging by the fresh footprints behind me, I was not the only person who had come to find it. The red light beneath the stone blinked with the steady patience of something that had been waiting for me. Once darkness. Once again I held my breath and listened. The cider house creaked around us as wind pressed against its stone walls. Water moved beneath the broken wheel outside, soft and constant. Somewhere in the rafters, loose metal tapped in an uneven rhythm. But beneath those sounds was another noise, a low electric hum. Echo leaned toward the opening and drew in a careful breath. His ears shifted forward, then flattened. He did not smell explosives. I knew his warning for that. This was something unfamiliar. I lowered my flashlight through the gap. The beam struck a narrow steel ladder descending into darkness. Old brick walls surrounded it. Electrical wire ran along one side, held in place by newer plastic brackets. That wire did not belong beneath a cider house built before the Second World War. Someone had maintained this place recently. The wet footprints behind us proved it. I turned and swept my light across the room again. No movement. The side door remained open. Wind carried a mist of rain across the threshold. Whoever had entered before us could still be nearby. Stay, I whispered. Echo ignored me. He placed one paw against my boot and looked down into the opening. You are injured enough in the head already. His tail moved once. I almost smiled. Then I pulled the stone higher. A hidden hinge groaned beneath its weight. The slab rose like the lid of a grave, revealing a rectangular opening wide enough for one man. A chain had been fixed beneath it as a counterweight. Samuel had built this entrance to be opened from above. I searched around the frame and found a metal hook mounted beneath the apple press. I secured the chain to it, then tested the stone it held. Echo stood at the edge. I reached beneath his collar and clipped on a short lead. Behind me, we descended. The ladder dropped perhaps 12 feet before my boots touched a concrete floor. Echo came after me slowly. The space was not a cellar. It was a corridor. Brick walls extended beneath the cider house, narrow enough that my shoulders nearly brushed both sides. The ceiling had been reinforced with heavy timber. Copper pipes disappeared into the darkness ahead. I remembered Samuel mentioning a storm shelter when I was a boy. He had said every mountain family needed somewhere safe when the sky turned black. But this was not a simple shelter. The electrical wiring was recent. So were the locks. A steel door stood at the end of the corridor. Above it, the red light continued to blink. Beside the handle was a small keypad. I tried the latch. Locked. Echo pressed his nose against the seam beneath the door. Then he sneezed and stepped back. "What do you smell?" He looked toward my right hand, the envelope. I had folded Samuel's letter into my jacket pocket. The dark stain on the flap had carried the scent of machine grease and fermented apples. I removed it and held it near the keypad. Echo sniffed the lower corner again. Something was trapped beneath the paper. I ran my thumb along the edge. The envelope had a false lining. Samuel had always made things with hidden compartments. As a child, I had watched him carve wooden puzzles for the county fair. A drawer would open only when pressure was applied in the correct sequence. A box would appear solid until one corner was tapped twice. He used to tell me that the best hiding place was not where no one could look. It was where everyone believed they had already looked. I tore the envelope carefully along the side. A thin strip of waxed paper slid into my palm. 4 words were written across it. Kathleen's birthday. Backward. My mother had been born on the 18th day of April. I stared at the keypad. Samuel had assumed I would remember. For many years I had tried not to. I entered the date in reverse order. The lock clicked. Echo's head rose. I opened the steel door. Warm, dry air touched my face. My flashlight revealed a room roughly the size of the farmhouse kitchen. Metal shelves covered 2 walls. A desk stood beneath a hanging lamp. Radio equipment filled a long table, some of it old enough to have served during the Vietnam War. But one machine was newer. A compact transmitter sat beneath the blinking light. Its cooling fan produced the hum we had heard above. Wires ran from it into the wall. A green display showed a row of letters. Automatic transmission, armed. I had worked with field communications equipment, but this system was homemade. Old components had been connected to newer digital hardware. Samuel had built it from whatever he could find. A microphone rested beside the transmitter. 3 portable radios sat on a charging station. A map of western North Carolina covered the wall above the desk. Red circles marked farms, orchards, and mountain properties across several counties. Names were written beside them: Martha Cole, Evelyn Briggs. The Harper family, James and Rose Talbot. Some names had been crossed out. Others had dates beside them. Echo walked to a metal cabinet in the corner and sniffed the lower drawer. I opened it. Inside were dozens of cassette tapes. Each had been labeled in Samuel's handwriting. Interview with Rose Talbot. County Records Office. Meeting with Silas Thomas. Final copy. My fingers stopped. Thomas, my father. I picked up the tape. The plastic case was scratched and cloudy with age. The date written on the label was from more than 30 years earlier. 2 days before my father disappeared, my pulse beat against my throat. Echo nudged my wrist. For a moment I was 9 years old again. I saw blood on my father's shirt. I heard Samuel shouting. I heard my mother crying beside the kitchen sink. Then my father told me to go upstairs. Every memory of him ended there. I placed the tape on the desk. An old cassette player sat beside the microphone. The power light came on when I pressed the button. Samuel had maintained that too. I inserted the tape. For several seconds there was only static. Then my father spoke. His voice was younger than I remembered, stronger. "Samuel, this is the last copy. Do not bring it to the sheriff. Do not bring it to anyone in the county government. Vane has people everywhere." I stopped breathing. My father continued. "I found 6 properties transferred through the foundation. Every owner was elderly, widowed, disabled, or related to a veteran. Every one of them believed they were signing temporary care agreements. Paper rustled near the recorder. The deeds were buried inside the contracts. Vane took control of the land, borrowed against it, then forced the families out. I looked at the map, the circled properties, the crossed-out names. My father's voice lowered. He wants the orchard because of the spring. The water rights are worth more than the trees. If he controls this ridge, he controls every development below it. A chair scraped in the recording. Then came a sound I recognized. Samuel's voice. "You stole from the orchard account." My father answered immediately. "I moved the money." "That is stealing. I used it to help the Harpers hire an attorney." "You had no right, I no time." Samuel sounded furious. "You put this family at risk. We were already at risk." The recording cut into static. Then my father spoke again, closer to the microphone. "If anything happens to me, protect Kathleen and Jonah. Do not tell Jonah until he is old enough to understand. Silas knows the boy has seen him at the cider house. My body went cold. I had seen Silas here, some part of me remembered. Not his face. A voice, a man standing near the press while my father argued with him. A silver watch reflecting sunlight. I reached for the stop button. Before I could press it, my father said one final sentence. "Tell my son I did not leave him." The tape clicked to an end. Silence filled the room. I sat without moving. Echo rested his chin on my knee. For most of my life I had believed my father had run away with stolen money. That belief had shaped everything. It had made me distrust promises. It had made abandonment feel inevitable. When men in my unit said they would follow me, I tested them harder than I should have. When women tried to love me, I found reasons to leave before they could. Even after Aaron died, some dark part of me had believed it happened because every man who trusted me eventually disappeared. But Thomas Reed had not abandoned us. He had been protecting someone. Perhaps all of us. I rewound the tape and listened to the final sentence again. "Tell my son I did not leave him." My throat tightened so hard that swallowing hurt. "I believed it," I said. Echo looked up. I believed the worst thing about him. The dog pressed closer. I placed one hand against his head. Then the floor above us groaned. Echo rose instantly. The grief vanished beneath training. I turned off the lamp. The bunker fell dark except for the blinking red light. Footsteps crossed the cider house floor, slow, careful. One, perhaps two. Echo faced the steel door. I drew my knife and moved to one side of the entrance. The hidden stone scraped above us. Whoever had entered knew exactly where it was. Light spilled down the ladder. A shadow moved across the corridor. I held my breath. Someone descended 3 rungs, then stopped. A man's voice spoke from above. "Jonah, Silas." I did not answer. "I saw your truck near the house," he called. The front door was open. That was a lie. I'd closed it. Echo's growl rose from deep in his chest. Silas heard it. "I know you are down there." I pressed the play button on one of the portable radios, raising the volume just enough for static to fill the bunker. Then I moved farther behind the door. Silas climbed down. His shoes touched the corridor floor. He carried a flashlight in one hand. The other remained inside his coat. He approached the steel door. Echo waited without moving. Silas shone his light into the room. It passed across the shelves, across the map, across the chair where I had been sitting. Then Echo barked. The sound exploded in the confined space. Silas stepped backward and pulled his hand from his coat. He was holding a pistol. I struck his wrist against the doorframe. The weapon fell. Silas drove his shoulder into my chest. He was stronger than he looked. We hit the brick wall together. Pain flashed through my spine. Echo lunged between us and locked his teeth around the sleeve of Silas's coat. Silas shouted, "Call him off." I kicked the pistol down the corridor. "Do not move. He is tearing my arm. He is holding your coat." Echo tightened his grip. Silas stopped struggling. I took the flashlight from the floor and aimed it at his face. His calm expression had disappeared. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Looking for you." "With a gun?" "This is private land in the mountains." "My private land." Silas looked toward the bunker. His eyes paused on the cassette player. For 1 second, fear crossed his face. Then it was gone. "What did Samuel tell you?" "Enough." Samuel was sick, so everyone keeps saying. He became obsessed with widows losing their property. Silas said nothing. I picked up the tape marked Thomas' final copy. His jaw tightened. "You recognize this?" Silas recovered quickly. "I recognize Samuel's handwriting. My father recorded it. Your father was a thief." Echo growled through the fabric. Silas glanced down. I stepped closer. "My father said you took land through fraudulent contracts. Your father made many accusations. He also said you knew I saw you inside this building." Silas studied me. A strange sadness entered his expression. "You were a frightened boy who wandered into an argument. You remember." "Of course I remember. What happened to my father?" "I do not know. You expect me to believe that?" Silas breathed slowly. "Thomas came to me asking for money. He had emptied the orchard account and needed a way out. When I refused, he threatened to destroy my foundation." The words were reasonable. His voice was controlled. Had I not heard the tape, I might have doubted myself. That was his gift. Silas could place a lie beside the truth until a person no longer knew which one had arrived first. I held up the cassette. "Then you will not mind if I bring this to federal investigators." His eyes hardened. "That tape proves nothing. Then why did you bring a pistol into a hidden bunker to find it? For several seconds, we stared at each other. The radio transmitter hummed behind me. Then Silas smiled. Not warmly, not politely. It was the first honest expression I had seen on his face. You have been home less than a day, he said. You do not understand this town. I understand men who enter a room armed. You understand battlefields. Briar Glen is different. No, it is not. Silas glanced at Echo. Call off the dog, Jonah. You are going to climb that ladder and leave. And if I refuse, Echo will stop holding your coat. Silas looked at the German shepherd's teeth. He believed me. I picked up the pistol and removed the magazine. Then I cleared the chamber and placed the ammunition in my pocket. Echo released Silas only when I gave the command. The sleeve of his expensive coat was wet and torn, but his skin had not been broken. Silas straightened it. You trained him well. He trained me too. Silas walked toward the ladder. At the bottom he stopped. Samuel was not killed, he said. I watched him. He fell. You expect that to comfort me? No. I expect you to decide whether digging through the sins of dead men is worth losing what remains of your life. Then he climbed out. I waited until his footsteps crossed the cider house and faded outside. Echo looked at me. You should have bitten him. His tail moved. I knew Silas would return. Next time he would not come alone. I removed every tape connected to my father, Samuel, and Silas. There were 11 in total. Then I studied the transmitter. A handwritten instruction card had been taped beneath the microphone. If the room is breached, turn the red switch. Wait for 3 tones. Speak clearly. The system will send audio to all registered receivers. A list of call signs followed. One belonged to the sheriff's office. One belonged to a newspaper in Asheville. Another belonged to a federal office. Samuel had built a dead man's broadcast system. He knew he might not survive long enough to reveal what he found. I searched the desk and discovered a digital recorder inside the upper drawer. Its battery was dead, but a cable connected it to the transmitter. A label had been fixed across the back. Final statement. I pressed the power button. Nothing happened. The cable had been cut. Not worn through. Cut cleanly. Someone had entered the bunker before us and disabled it. Perhaps the person whose wet footprints we had followed. Echo moved toward a cabinet near the transmitter. He sniffed once, then pawed at the bottom. Behind the cabinet, a bundle of wire disappeared into a hole in the brick wall. One cable had been pulled loose. I reconnected it. The display flickered. A warning appeared. Remote receiver active. Then a small speaker on the desk crackled. A woman's voice whispered through it. Samuel? I froze. The voice came again. Samuel, can you hear me? I lifted the microphone. This is not Samuel. Then the woman inhaled sharply. Who are you? Jonah Reed. The connection filled with static. When she spoke again, her voice trembled. Yes, my name is Evelyn Briggs. I looked toward the map. Her name was written beside a red circle. What is this system? Samuel gave me a receiver. He gave them to several families. Why? So we could warn each other. About Silas? The static grew louder. Yes. I glanced toward the corridor. Echo stood watch at the door. Where are you? At home. Are you safe? No. Her answer came too quickly. What happened? A truck has been parked across from my driveway since this morning. Have you called the sheriff? The deputy who answered works security events for Silas's foundation. I looked again at the map. Why is your property marked? My husband served in Korea. After he died, the foundation offered to repair my roof and help with medical bills. They brought papers. What papers? I thought they were loan documents. They were not. No, her voice broke. They own half my land now. I closed my eyes. My father's recording had been telling the truth. How long ago? 7 years. Why did Samuel not take this public? He'd stopped him. People were afraid. Silas helps everyone. He pays hospital bills. He buys fire trucks. He sends veterans on hunting trips. Who would believe people like us over a man like him? I understood. Silas did not hide his power. He distributed it. Every favor became a wall around him. Every donation purchased another person's doubt. Did Samuel tell you about my father? I asked. Evelyn went quiet. Then she whispered, Thomas saved our farm. How? He gave my parents money for an attorney. Samuel was furious, because it came from the orchard account. What happened to Thomas? I do not know. Someone knows. Yes, who? The speaker crackled. A sound came through her receiver. A door opening. Evelyn stopped breathing. Then a man spoke in the background. Miss Briggs? Her microphone struck something hard. "Evelyn," I said. No response. The line hissed. Then a second man's voice came through the speaker. "Check the bedroom." Echo turned toward me, his body again stiff. I pressed the transmission switch. "Evelyn, leave the house now." A crash sounded. Someone had knocked over furniture. Then Evelyn whispered, "Back window, go." The connection broke. I looked at the map. Her property was less than 4 miles from the orchard. I gathered the tapes, the digital recorder, and Samuel's handwritten notes. Echo was already at the ladder. We climbed out and ran into the rain. Silas's vehicle was gone. My truck stood uphill beside the farmhouse. The path was steep and slick, but Echo reached it ahead of me. As I opened the driver's door, headlights appeared beyond the orchard gate. A dark pickup turned onto the property. It did not come toward the house. It headed directly for the cider house. There were 3 men inside. One held a gasoline can between his boots. I started the engine. The truck behind us accelerated. Echo climbed across the passenger seat and barked at the rear window. I could drive to Evelyn's house, or I could stop the men from destroying the bunker. For one terrible second, I hesitated. Aaron's voice returned from the mountain. "Make the call, Jonah. Every life behind me, every consequence ahead." I looked at Echo, Evelyn first. The old Ford tore through the upper field as the men reached the cider house. In the mirror, I saw one of them raise the gasoline can. Then orange light flared against the stone wall. The building that held my father's final words began to burn behind us. But somewhere down the mountain, an elderly widow was running for her life. And Echo and I were the only help she had. The fire followed us down the mountain. I could not see the cider house through the trees, but its glow moved across the low clouds behind us. Orange light flickered in my rearview mirror, vanishing and returning whenever the road curved. Echo stood with his front paws against the passenger door. His eyes stayed on the darkness ahead. 4 miles is not far until someone is hunting an old woman. Then every turn feels too long. Rain swept across the windshield. The wipers dragged water from one side to the other, never clearing enough for me to see more than a few yards. I pressed the accelerator harder. The engine protested. "Find her," I told Echo, his ears lifted at Evelyn's name. He had heard the fear in her voice. So had I. My father had once risked everything to help Evelyn Briggs's family keep their land. More than 30 years later, I was racing toward that same property, while men searched her house. It felt less like coincidence and more like a debt passed from one generation to the next. Evelyn's driveway appeared between 2 stone pillars. The mailbox had been knocked sideways. A dark sport utility vehicle stood near the house with its lights turned off. I stopped before reaching the gate. The men inside Evelyn's home had heard my voice through the radio. They knew someone was coming. Driving to the front door would announce exactly where I was. I backed into a narrow logging path and shut off the engine. Rain struck the roof. Echo waited for my command. I removed Silas's pistol from beneath my jacket. The magazine was still in my pocket. I loaded it, chambered 1 round, and checked the safety. I did not like carrying another man's weapon, but I liked the thought of entering a dark house unarmed even less. "We find Evelyn," I whispered. "No chasing unless I tell you." Echo touched his nose to my hand. We stepped into the rain. The Briggs property had once been a dairy farm. An old pasture stretched behind the house, bordered by woods and a narrow creek. I could see no lights inside. One window near the kitchen stood open. A curtain moved through it like a pale hand. Echo lowered his nose and began tracking along the edge of the driveway. He found Evelyn's scent near a broken flower pot. The trail crossed the yard, passed beneath the open window, and continued toward the back pasture. There was blood on the window frame, not much. A dark streak against white paint. Echo smelled it and moved faster. I followed him downhill. Behind us a door opened. A flashlight beam swept across the yard. "Check the trees," a man called. Another voice answered from inside the house. "The receiver is gone. She has it. She cannot have gone far." Echo and I reached the pasture fence. He slipped beneath the lowest rail. I climbed over and landed in wet grass. The creek lay perhaps 200 yards ahead. Beyond it stood a small building with a sagging roof. An old spring house. Echo pulled toward it. A flashlight appeared behind us. The beam crossed the pasture. I dropped to one knee beside the fence. Echo flattened against the grass. A man walked from the house, carrying a long flashlight in one hand and a short metal bar in the other. He stopped near the broken flower pot. "Miss Briggs," he called. His voice was gentle, almost kind. "We are not going to hurt you." Echo's lips lifted. The man continued toward us. "We only need the radio Samuel gave you." I waited until he passed the fence, then I rose behind him. "Turn around." The man froze. Rain ran from the edge of his cap. He slowly faced me. He was one of the men from the pickup at the orchard. I recognized the square jaw and heavy work jacket. He looked at the pistol in my hand, then at Echo. "Where is Evelyn?" I asked. "I do not know," Echo growled. The man glanced toward the dog. "I was told you had him under control. You were told wrong." He raised the metal bar slightly. "Drop it," I said. "This is private property. It belongs to Evelyn Briggs." "Not all of it." That answer told me more than he intended. He smiled. "You already think you know. I want to hear you say it. You are not recording me." "Maybe I am." His smile disappeared. He threw the flashlight directly at my face. I turned my head. The metal bar followed. It struck my forearm hard enough to numb my hand. The pistol fell into the grass. Echo launched before the man could swing again. His jaws closed around the attacker's wrist. The metal bar dropped. The man shouted and struck Echo across the ribs with his free arm. Echo held on. I drove my shoulder into the man and forced him against the fence. The old rails shook. He tried to reach inside his jacket. I caught his arm and twisted it behind him. "Call him off. Stop moving. He is breaking my wrist. He has not started yet." A second flashlight moved across the pasture. The other man was coming. I pulled the attacker's belt free, wrapped it around his wrists, and secured him to the fence. Then I retrieved the pistol. "Your friend will find you eventually," I said. The man spat rainwater from his mouth. "You think Vane is going to let you walk away?" I leaned closer. "Silas," named Sommerfeld. The man looked at me. His expression changed. It was small, but I saw it. "What do you know about Samuel's death?" "Nothing." "You reacted." "I reacted because you are crazy." Echo stood beside him with blood darkening the fur around his mouth. The blood was not his. I checked his ribs with one hand. "Where is Evelyn?" I asked again. The man stared at me. Then he looked toward the spring house. That was enough. Echo and I ran. The creek had risen with the rain. Water moved over the stones in dark, fast sheets. The spring house door was closed. Echo reached it and scratched once. "Evelyn," I whispered. "It is Jonah." No answer. I tried the handle. Locked. Behind us, the second man entered the pasture. His flashlight swung from side to side. I pressed my shoulder against the spring house door. The wood groaned but held. "Evelyn, open the door." A frightened voice came from inside. "How do I know it is you?" "You spoke to me through Samuel's radio. You told me my father helped your family." The lock moved. The door opened less than an inch. An elderly woman stared through the gap. She had blood on one temple and a portable radio clutched against her chest. Echo pushed his nose through the opening. Evelyn looked down at him. "Samuel said you would have a dog. He said that?" "He said the dog would know whom to trust." The flashlight beam swept across the creek. I entered the spring house and closed the door. The room smelled of wet stone and mineral water. Shelves held old jars and rusted tools. Evelyn wore a nightgown beneath a heavy coat. Her feet were bare inside rubber boots. "Are you injured?" I asked. I cut my head climbing through the window. "Anyone else in the house?" She hesitated. "My grandson." My stomach tightened. "Where?" "He is away with his school. They took the children to a science camp near Boone." "When does he return?" "Tomorrow evening." Relief came, but only briefly. "Does Silas know he lives with you?" "Everyone knows." The light outside moved closer. I examined the spring house. One window too small for me, one door rear exit. The approaching man called across the creek. "Miss Briggs, we know you are in there." Evelyn gripped the radio tighter. "He works for the foundation," she whispered. "His name is Wade. Does he carry a gun? I have never seen one." That meant nothing. I leaned close to Echo. "Circle." He understood. I opened the door just enough for him to slip through. Echo vanished into the rain. I closed it again. Wade crossed the creek slowly. Water splashed around his boots. "Miss Briggs, Mr. Vane is worried about you." Evelyn shook her head. I raised one finger to my lips. Wade reached the spring house. His shadow covered the narrow gap beneath the door. "Open up." I stood to the left of the frame. He tried the handle. Locked. Then he stepped back. The door burst inward beneath his boot. He entered with one hand raised. He carried no gun, only a flashlight. I caught his jacket and pulled him inside. He swung the light. It struck my cheek. I drove him into the stone wall. Evelyn moved away. Wade reached for my throat. Then Echo appeared through the open doorway. He had circled the building exactly as trained. His bark echoed off the stone. Wade turned. I struck him once beneath the ribs. The air left his lungs. He dropped to his knees. Echo stood over him. "Where is the receiver?" Wade gasped. Evelyn held it tighter. "What does Silas want with it?" I asked. Wade looked at the floor. I pressed the pistol against the back of his shoulder. "Answer me. He thinks Samuel recorded something." "He recorded many things, not Samuel." Wade looked toward Evelyn. "Thomas Reed." The Springhouse became very quiet. "What recording?" I asked. "I do not know." "Then why are you here?" "We were told every receiver might contain a copy." I looked at the radio in Evelyn's hands. It was larger than the portable units in the bunker. An old emergency receiver with a plastic shell and a steel antenna. Evelyn stared at it as though she had never seen it before. "Samuel told me never to open it," she said. Wade's eyes moved toward the doorway. He was calculating distance. Echo saw it too. The dog stepped closer. "Do not," I warned. Wade remained still. I took his phone, keys, and wallet. Then I secured his wrists with his own shoelaces. "We need to leave," I told Evelyn. "My house, they may have more men coming. My medicines are inside. I will get them later. The documents Samuel gave me are beneath my bed. That is what they are looking for. I cannot leave them." I understood the feeling. Paper should not matter more than a human life. But sometimes paper contained the only proof that a life had been stolen. "Stay behind me," I said. We crossed the creek and returned through the pasture. The first man remained tied to the fence. He shouted when he saw us. Wade walked ahead of me with his hands secured. Echo guarded our rear. The house looked empty. The dark vehicle was still beside it. I placed both men inside the Springhouse and locked them in. They would eventually break the old door, but not immediately. Then Evelyn led us through the kitchen window. Her home had been torn apart. Drawers lay open. Photographs covered the floor. A china cabinet had been pushed over, its broken dishes scattered across the room. Evelyn stopped when she saw them, my mother's plates. I placed a hand against her shoulder. "We need to move." Upstairs, the bedroom mattress had been pulled from the frame. "They knew," she whispered. The floor beneath the bed had already been opened. The documents were gone. Evelyn sat on the edge of the overturned mattress. Her face emptied. "That was all of it." "What did Samuel give you?" "Copies of our original deed, payment records, letters from the foundation." "Did they prove fraud?" "They proved my husband never agreed to transfer the western field." I looked around the room. The men had searched quickly. Clothes had been thrown from drawers, but they had not emptied the closet. They had found the hiding place too easily. "Who knew the documents were beneath the floor?" "Only Samuel." "And your grandson?" Evelyn looked up sharply. "No." "Anyone else?" She thought for a moment. "Silas installed the floor after my husband died." There it was. Every act of kindness had been a map. Silas repaired roofs and learned where families stored their papers. He paid medical bills and learned who was desperate. He arranged transportation and learned who lived alone. He did not simply help people, he studied them. Sirens sounded in the distance. Evelyn moved toward the window. Fire trucks. The glow above the orchard had grown brighter. My cider house was still burning. I took Evelyn downstairs. We returned to my truck as smoke rolled across the ridge. The 11 tapes and Samuel's notes were still beneath the rear seat. I checked them before starting the engine, safe for the moment. As we drove toward the orchard, Evelyn held Samuel's receiver in her lap. Echo sat between us. She kept looking at him. "Samuel used to talk about your dog," she said. "He never met Echo. He knew you had brought a military dog home. He followed every newspaper story and every public record he could find. Then why did he never call?" Evelyn looked through the windshield. "Shame. That did not stop him from leaving me his problems." "He did not leave you a problem. What would you call it?" "A chance to finish what your father began." Anger rose before I could stop it. "My father began something that destroyed our family." Evelyn turned toward me. "Your father saved mine." "And lost his own, yes." Her answer was quiet. It hurt more because she did not argue. "Thomas made mistakes," she continued. "So did Samuel. Good intentions do not erase what they did to you." I kept my eyes on the road. "Tell me what happened." I only know part of it. Tell me that part. Evelyn rested both hands on the receiver. Your father discovered the deed transfers while repairing a pump on the Harper property. Mr. Harper showed him a foundation contract. Thomas realized the signature page did not match the rest. Then he investigated. For months Samuel helped at first. What changed? Silas threatened to shut down the orchard's credit line. Samuel became frightened, so my uncle abandoned him. Not at first. The fire glow appeared through the trees. Evelyn continued. Thomas planned to meet a federal investigator outside Asheville. Samuel believed he could stop the conflict before anyone was hurt. How? He told Silas where Thomas would be. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. He betrayed my father. He believed Silas only wanted the documents. What happened at the meeting? No one knows. Someone knows. Samuel spent the rest of his life trying to find out. I remembered his letter. I failed your father and then I failed you. That was not the apology of a man who had merely misunderstood. It was the confession of someone whose fear had opened a door for violence. What did Samuel tell my mother? That Thomas ran. I looked at Evelyn. He repeated the lie. He thought Silas might come after you if anyone knew Thomas had been collecting evidence. My mother died believing her husband had abandoned her. Evelyn lowered her eyes. Yes, the word landed like a stone. Samuel had protected me by destroying the memory of my father. Perhaps he believed that was necessary. Perhaps he had spent every day afterward understanding that necessity could still be cruel. We reached the orchard gate. Fire engines crowded the upper road. Red lights flashed across the trees. The fire had been contained to the cider house. Its roof had collapsed, but the stone walls still stood. Smoke poured through the open windows. Firefighters dragged hoses from the creek. A crowd had gathered near the farmhouse. At the center stood Silas Vane. His torn coat was gone. He now wore a heavy fire department jacket over a clean shirt. He handed bottles of water to volunteers and spoke calmly with the fire chief. To anyone watching, he looked like the man holding the community together. Then he saw me. His gaze moved to Evelyn. For half a second his face hardened. Then concern replaced it. He came toward us. Miss Briggs, thank God. Evelyn shrank against the truck. Silas stopped several feet away. We heard someone broke into your home. I stepped between them. You heard quickly. One of my volunteers received an emergency call. From whom? Silas ignored the question. He looked toward the cider house. I warned you the building was unsafe. Unsafe buildings do not carry gasoline cans. Several firefighters turned toward us. Silas lowered his voice. You should be careful what you accuse people of saying. I did not say, anyone told me. His eyes narrowed. I had caught him, only slightly. But enough. A sheriff's vehicle arrived behind the fire engines. Sheriff Daniel Rusk stepped out. He was near retirement age, with a heavy gray mustache and the slow movement of a man whose knees had carried too much weight for too many years. A younger deputy followed him. She wore her dark hair tied behind her head and watched the scene with sharp, tired eyes. Silas approached the sheriff first. Of course he did. Daniel, Silas said, I believe Mr. Reed may be in trouble. The sheriff looked at me. What kind of trouble? Silas raised his torn sleeve, which he had apparently brought with him. He attacked me beneath the cider house and took my firearm. The crowd became quiet. Echo moved closer to my leg. Sheriff Rusk looked toward the dog. Is that true, Mr. Reed? He entered a locked underground room carrying a pistol. Silas shook his head. I went looking for him after seeing the door open. His dog attacked without warning. Echo held his coat. He did not break the skin. You assaulted me and stole a legally registered weapon. I cleared the weapon after you drew it. The younger deputy watched Silas rather than me. That interested me. Sheriff Rusk extended his hand. The pistol, I gave it to him. Silas glanced at the sheriff. You see what we are dealing with. Samuel's nephew has been back less than a day. There is a fire, a break-in at Miss Briggs's home, and an armed confrontation. Evelyn stepped forward. Jonah saved me. Silas turned to her. His expression softened. Saved you from whom? She opened her mouth, then stopped. Silas continued gently. Miss Briggs, your grandson returns tomorrow, does he not? The threat was hidden beneath concern. I saw Evelyn understand it. Her face went pale. Sheriff Rusk looked at her. Who entered your home? Evelyn stared at Silas. One truthful sentence could expose him. One truthful sentence could place her grandson in danger. I did not see them. she whispered. Silas nodded sympathetically. You have endured a terrible night. I felt anger move through me like heat. He had silenced her in front of half the town without raising his voice. The sheriff faced me. Did you restrain anyone at the Briggs property? 2, where are they? In the spring house. A deputy spoke into her radio. Sheriff Rusk studied me. You left 2 men tied inside a building? They broke into Evelyn's home. You witnessed that? I heard them searching it through Samuel's radio. Silas sighed. Daniel Samuel filled his head with the same conspiracies. Echo suddenly stepped towards Silas. He sniffed the lower edge of the fire department jacket. Then his posture changed. His tail became rigid. His nose moved to Silas's right cuff. Echo barked once, a sharp detection bark. I stepped closer. There was a dark stain near the cuff, the same oily residue that had marked Samuel's envelope. Machine grease, fermented apples, and beneath it, the chemical bite of gasoline. Silas had changed coats, but not shirts. Besheet Echo smelled the accelerant. Silas pulled his arm away. Control your dog. I looked at the deputy. He detects explosive compounds and accelerants. The younger deputy's attention moved to Silas's sleeve. The sheriff frowned. Silas laughed softly. I helped move fuel cans away from the equipment shed when the fire started. 2, perfect. When did you arrive? I asked. After the fire department. One of the volunteer firefighters looked toward him. No, the man said. Everyone turned. The firefighter was young, perhaps 20. He seemed startled by his own voice. Silas looked at him. What did you say, Colin? The young man swallowed. Your vehicle was already near the lower road when we came in. Silas smiled patiently. I was checking the smoke before calling it in. The firefighter looked uncertain. Silas placed a hand on his shoulder. You were working hard. It has been a confusing night. The young man lowered his eyes, another wall purchased with kindness. Sheriff Rusk turned to me. I need you to remain at the farmhouse while we investigate. Am I under arrest? Not at this time. Then I am going into the cider house. The structure is unstable. There is a bunker beneath it. The crowd murmured. Silas spoke. Samuel's storm cellar. You knew about it. Everyone knew Samuel had one. No one at the diner mentioned it. Sheriff Rusk raised one hand. That is enough. The younger deputy stepped closer to me. Let the fire chief clear the structure, she said quietly. Then I will go down with you. Her nameplate read Mara Cole. You believe me? I asked. I believe evidence before people. Her eyes shifted towards Silas. Most days, the fire chief declared the upper floor unsafe before midnight. The roof had fallen across the apple press. Water and ash covered the stones. But the hidden entrance remained intact. The fire had burned above the bunker, not inside it. Silas's men had poured gasoline too quickly. The stone floor and steel door had protected what lay below. Deputy Cole entered with me. Echo followed despite the sheriff's objection. The corridor smelled of smoke. When I opened the steel door, my flashlight revealed the damage. The transmitter had been smashed. Shelves had been overturned. Cassette cases lay broken across the floor. Someone had entered after we left and before the fire grew too strong. They were not only burning the building, Morris said. They were searching for what? I showed her Samuel's map. Then I told her about my father's tape and the families whose land had been taken. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she looked toward the damaged transmitter. Do you still have the recordings? Some. Do not give them to Sheriff Rusk yet. That surprised me. Why? Silas paid for his last election campaign. Is the sheriff corrupt? I do not know. That is not reassuring. It is honest. Echo sniffed beneath the overturned desk. He pawed at a section of broken brick. I moved the debris aside. Behind it was a narrow cavity. A small metal case had been hidden inside the wall. The case contained no tapes, only a child's medal, a photograph, and a brass military identification tag. The medal belonged to me. I had won it at a school race when I was 8. For years I believed my father had taken it when he disappeared. The photograph showed Thomas and Samuel standing beside the cider house. My father held me on his shoulders. All 3 of us were smiling. The identification tag lay beneath the picture. Thomas Elias Reed. I turned it over. Words had been scratched into the back by hand. Not dead. Federal Survey Archive. Cabinet 19. Deputy Cole read the message over my shoulder. What is the Federal Survey Archive? I do not know. It may refer to the Land Records Office in Asheville. Echo sniffed the case again. Then he pressed his nose against the photograph. A dark fingerprint stained one corner, grease, apples. The same scent. Samuel had handled it inside the cider house shortly before his death. I looked at Mara. Cabinet 19 may contain the proof Silas could not find here. Then we go before the office opens. A sound came from the corridor. We turned. Evelyn stood at the bottom of the ladder holding her receiver. She had followed us despite the smoke. Her hands were trembling. I opened it, she said. She turned the radio over. A thin metal panel had been removed from the back. Inside was a small cassette. Samuel had hidden it behind the battery compartment. The label contained only 2 words for Jonah. Evelyn handed it to me. The cassette player had survived the search, though its cover was cracked. I inserted the tape. Samuel's voice entered the burned bunker. Older, tired. Jonah, if you found this, then you know I lied about your father. I stood beneath the blinking remains of the transmitter and listened. I told Silas where Thomas would meet the federal investigator. I believed I was protecting the orchard. Instead, I sent your father into a trap. Samuel paused. I found his truck beside the river 2 days later. There was blood inside, but there was no body. Evelyn covered her mouth. Samuel continued. Silas told me Thomas was dead. I believed him for 27 years. My heart began to pound. Then I received a land survey filed under another name. The handwriting was Thomas's. It contained a message only I would recognize. Paper moved in the recording. He survived, Jonah. The bunker seemed to tilt beneath me. My father had not died beside the river. He had been alive years later. Samuel's voice broke. I do not know where he went. I only know he left evidence in the Federal Survey Archive. Cabinet 19. If Silas learns that record exists, he will destroy it. The tape hissed. Then Samuel spoke one last time. Do not make my mistake. Do not let fear choose for you. The recording ended. No one moved. My father had survived. Perhaps he had lived under another name. Perhaps he had died years later. Perhaps he was still alive somewhere beyond those mountains. But he had left something in Asheville. Something Silas had spent decades trying to erase. Above us, a vehicle engine started. Echo ran into the corridor. We climbed the ladder. By the time we emerged into the ruined cider house, Silas's car was moving down the orchard road. He had been standing outside long enough to see Evelyn enter with the receiver, long enough to guess that we had found another message. Deputy Cole checked her watch. The Federal Archive would open in less than 6 hours. Silas had a faster vehicle, friends in county government, and men willing to enter an old woman's home. We had a damaged truck, an exhausted widow, and a German shepherd who had not slept since Tennessee. I looked at the road where Silas's taillights had disappeared. Then I remembered Samuel's final warning. Do not let fear choose for you. I had allowed fear to shape most of my life. Fear of failing another team. Fear of trusting family. Fear of discovering that the worst things I believed were true. That night, beneath the smoke of the burned cider house, I made a different choice. I chose to follow my father's trail, and Silas Vane was already racing to bury it. We left Briar Glen before the smoke cleared from the orchard. Deputy Mara Cole drove her county vehicle. I followed in my truck with Echo beside me and Evelyn Briggs wrapped in a wool blanket across the back seat. No one suggested leaving her behind. Her house had been broken into. The men responsible knew she had helped Samuel. Her grandson was due home that evening. Until we understood how far Silas Vane's reach extended, no place in the county felt safe. Mara had removed the tracking unit from her patrol vehicle before we left. She found it beneath the rear bumper, fixed there with a black magnet. It belongs to the department, she said. Standard equipment? No. Can the sheriff see where you are? He can now see where I left the tracker. She had placed it beneath a freight truck heading west. For the first time that night, Evelyn smiled. It lasted only a moment. Then she looked through the rear window toward the mountains. Samuel never trusted the sheriff, she said. Mara kept her eyes on the road. Sheriff Rusk was not in office when most of the land transfers happened. No, Evelyn replied, but Silas helped put him there. Mara did not defend him. The highway curved through black ridges and sleeping towns. Rain weakened to mist, then returned whenever we climbed. Echo remained alert, but exhaustion showed in the slow movement of his head. He had tracked Evelyn, fought 2 men, searched a burning building, and climbed into a damaged bunker. Still, he refused to lie down. I rested one hand against his shoulder. You can sleep, Echo watched the road. That was not a suggestion. He turned toward me, blinked once, and stayed upright. Evelyn leaned forward between the seats. He thinks you need him awake. He usually does. Samuel thought the same way. I looked at her reflection in the mirror. Samuel had a dog, a brown hound named Moses. That animal followed him everywhere. I do not remember him. Moses died shortly before you were born. Evelyn touched the radio receiver in her lap. Samuel buried him beneath the oldest apple tree. He said a good dog should remain where he could watch the family. I thought of Samuel alone in the orchard after my mother died. Alone after my father disappeared, alone after I left. Perhaps he had spent years surrounded by the graves of everything he failed to protect. That did not excuse him, but understanding was not the same as forgiveness. Sometimes understanding only gave pain a sharper shape. The Federal Survey Archive occupied the lower floor of a government building near Asheville. It was not the grand hall of records I had imagined. It had stained carpet, buzzing fluorescent lights, and a front desk protected by thick glass. A faded map of North Carolina hung beside an old vending machine. We arrived shortly before dawn. The building would not open for another hour. Mara parked across the street with the lights off. I studied every vehicle in the lot. No sign of Silas. That worried me more than seeing him would have. Evelyn opened Samuel's receiver again and examined the hidden cassette compartment. Why would Thomas hide evidence in a survey archive? Mara asked. Land surveys remain attached to properties, Evelyn said. Even when ownership changes, I looked at her. You know county records. My husband and I fought Silas for 7 years. Her voice contained no pride, only fatigue. Mara turned toward me. Your father may have used an ordinary survey to preserve something no private attorney could quietly remove. Unless Silas has someone inside this building. Mara checked the entrance. He probably does. Then why wait for it to open? Because breaking into a federal records facility would make every camera in Asheville remember us. That has not stopped Silas. We are trying to prove we are different from him. I looked at Echo. He had finally lowered his head onto his paws. The sight of him resting should have calmed me. Instead, it reminded me how tired he was. I had asked too much of him again. Aaron Bell's voice returned from the ridge. He is hurt, Jonah. I pushed the memory away. Echo was not Aaron. The orchard was not that mountain. I was not trapped in the same decision. The front doors opened as the sky began to pale. A security guard stepped outside, placed a sign beside the entrance, and unlocked the public access doors. Mara remained in uniform. That gave us authority. It also made us easy to remember. We entered together. Echo wore his service harness. No one challenged him. A clerk named Patricia Nolan sat behind the glass. She was in her late 60s and wore a silver chain attached to her reading glasses. Mara presented her identification. We need access to a historical survey cabinet. Patricia studied the card. County deputies usually request records electronically. This concerns an active property fraud investigation. Do you have a federal case number? Not yet. Patricia looked at me. And he is the property owner. And the woman? Patricia sighed. Cabinet number 19, I said. Her expression did not change, but her right hand stopped moving. You recognize it, I said. No. You hesitated, old. I hesitate often. Echo rose beside me. His nose pointed toward a closed door behind Patricia. She noticed. No animals beyond the public counter. He is a service dog. This is a records facility. Mara leaned closer to the glass. Miss Nolan, has anyone asked about Cabinet 19 recently? Patricia removed her glasses. I am not permitted to discuss requests made by other citizens. That means yes, I did not say that. The elevator opened behind us. 2 men stepped into the lobby, dark coats, clean boots. One carried a rectangular tool case. They did not look toward us. That told me they had already noticed us. Echo's posture changed. I placed one hand against his harness. The men approached the security desk. One displayed a card. The guard nodded and allowed them through a restricted door. Patricia watched them disappear. Who are they? I asked. Maintenance. The archive has old equipment. The man with the tool case had a fresh cut across his right cheek. I had seen that cut hours earlier. He was the man Echo had restrained at Evelyn's fence. He should still have been locked inside the spring house. Someone had released him. I turned to Mara. He was at Evelyn's house. Mara reached for her radio. I stopped her. If the sheriff freed him, your radio may warn them. Patricia stood. Cabinet 19, I said. Now the fire alarm began to ring. Red lights flashed along the ceiling. A recorded voice instructed everyone to exit. The maintenance men were not repairing equipment. They were clearing the building. Mara drew her sidearm. Patricia backed away from the glass. What is happening? You tell us, Mara said. Smoke moved beneath the restricted door. Not heavy smoke. White chemical. A diversion. The security guard began directing workers toward the entrance. The two maintenance men had disappeared into the archive. Where is Cabinet 19? I asked. Patricia shook her head. They will destroy it, Evelyn said. Patricia looked at her. Who? Silas Vane. The name broke something in the clerk's expression. Fear. Not surprise you know him, I said. Patricia lowered her voice. He called yesterday. What did he ask? Whether anyone had requested records filed by Thomas Reed. He knew Samuel had found the archive reference. He said the documents were connected to a fraudulent veteran's claim. And you believed him? Patricia looked toward the smoke. I believed he was a former prosecutor, so did half the county. The alarm continued. Patricia reached beneath the desk and pressed a button. The restricted door unlocked. Lower level, she whispered. Eastern storage room. Cabinet 19 is behind the survey maps. Mara faced Evelyn. Stay with Patricia. Evelyn shook her head. I have waited 30 years. You will wait 5 more minutes. Echo and I followed Mara through the door. The corridor beyond was filling with white vapor from a smoke canister. It burned my throat but carried no heat. We moved low. Echo tracked ahead. The stairwell door stood open. Fresh scratches marked the lock. We descended 1 level. The basement archive extended beneath the entire building. Metal shelves formed narrow rows beneath hanging lights. The alarm was louder there. Cabinet numbers appeared at the ends of each aisle. 7, 11, 14. Echo turned sharply at the next row. He barked. A man stepped from behind the shelves and swung a steel pipe. Mara blocked it with her forearm. The impact knocked her weapon away. I drove into him. We struck a cabinet together. Folders spilled across the floor. The man with the cut cheek appeared behind us. He held a can of industrial solvent. He poured it across a stack of survey records. The chemical smell filled the aisle. Then he raised a lighter. Echo lunged. The man turned and kicked him. His boot struck Echo beneath the jaw. Echo fell against the shelving. Something inside me broke open. I hit the man before the lighter reached the floor. My fist caught his throat. He stumbled. I struck him again. And again he fell onto the records. My hand closed around his collar. The basement disappeared. For 1 terrible second I was back on the mountain. Dust, gunfire, Aaron calling my name, a man beneath my hands. A voice ordering me to finish it. Then Echo whined. A small sound, pain not fear, the basement returned. I released the man. He rolled onto his side, gasping. Mara had subdued the other attacker and secured his wrists with plastic restraints. I ran to Echo. He tried to stand. His front legs trembled. Easy, blood marked his lower lip. I checked his jaw, neck, and ribs. No obvious break, but his eyes were unfocused. Mara knelt beside us. He needs a veterinarian. He needs one now. The man on the floor laughed weakly. You leave, we burn the cabinet. I looked at him. He smiled through his pain. You cannot save both. The sentence struck deeper than he knew. I had heard versions of it throughout my career. Choose the hostage or the evidence. Choose the team or the mission. Choose the wounded man or the men still moving. There was never enough time. Never enough hands. Never a decision without a ghost attached to it. Echo tried to rise again. I placed one arm beneath his chest. We are leaving, Mara stared at me. Jonah, he comes first. The attacker laughed again. You came all this way for nothing. I lifted Echo. His weight settled against me. Then he turned his head. He looked past my shoulder, toward the end of the aisle. His nose moved, once, twice. Then he gave a quiet detection bark. Even injured, he had found it. Cabinet 19 stood behind a rolling wall of survey maps. The men had not yet reached it. Mara understood. I will get the file. You have less than a minute, she ran. I carried Echo toward the stairs. Behind me, metal groaned. A drawer opened. Paper shifted. Then Mara shouted, "It is empty." The attackers smiled. Silas had arrived first. Mara searched the cabinet. Nothing, no file, no survey. Echo moved weakly in my arms. His paw pressed against my chest. Then he turned his muzzle toward the floor. He was still working. Put me down, his eyes seemed to say. No, he pushed again. I lowered him carefully. Echo limped toward cabinet 19. He smelled the open drawer, then moved to the cabinet beside it. His nose followed a line downward. He scratched at the baseboard. Mara knelt. There is something behind it. She pulled the metal cabinet forward. A brown survey tube had been taped to the wall behind it. The tube was old and covered in dust. Across one end were the initials T. E. My father. Mara tore the tape loose. The man with the cut cheek struggled to stand. I raised Silas' empty pistol and pointed it at him. He did not know it held no ammunition. He stopped. Mara opened the tube. Inside was a rolled land survey and a sealed plastic sleeve containing photographs, bank records, and a handwritten statement. She unfolded the first page. It named Silas. Take everything. A sharp electrical pop sounded above us. The lights went out. Emergency lamps came on along the walls. Smoke thickened. The diversion had become a real fire. The solvent had reached an electrical outlet. Flames climbed the paper records behind us. Mara gathered the documents and shoved them beneath her uniform jacket. I lifted Echo again. We climbed through smoke as sprinklers activated overhead. Water poured down the stairwell. The alarm became a single endless cry. Patricia and Evelyn waited outside with the evacuated workers. Evelyn ran toward us when she saw Echo. What happened? He was struck. Patricia pointed across the road. There is an animal hospital 2 blocks east. Mara handed me her vehicle keys. Go. What about you? I am taking the evidence to the federal field office. You said the sheriff may be compromised. He does not control federal agents. Neither does Silas. Mara looked toward the burning building. We are about to learn. I carried Echo to the patrol vehicle. Evelyn climbed into the back seat. Mara caught my arm before I closed the door. Jonah, the statement says your father survived the river attack. Samuel said the same thing. There is more. I waited. He entered federal witness protection. The world narrowed. What? The document contains an old contact name. A marshal named Robert Larkin. Where is my father? It does not say. I do not know. Mara gripped the evidence beneath her jacket, but the statement is dated only 12 years ago. 12 years. My father had been alive whilst I served overseas. Alive when my mother was buried. Alive when I stopped writing to Samuel. Alive, perhaps, when Aaron died. Questions rose faster than I could hold them. Why had he never returned? Why had he never contacted me? Had protection become another excuse for abandonment? Echo groaned softly inside the vehicle. I closed the questions away. One mission at a time. The animal hospital admitted Echo immediately. A veterinarian examined his jaw, ribs, and spine. No bones were broken. The kick had caused a concussion and severe bruising. He needed rest, observation, and time. The veterinarian said he should remain overnight. Echo refused to let the staff lead him away. He planted his feet and pulled toward me. His balance was poor, but his determination remained absolute. I knelt in front of him. You are staying, his ears lowered. This is not a debate. He pressed his head against my chest. For one moment I held him there. Then I whispered the command I had used only a few times during our service. Stand down. Echo became still. The words meant his work was finished. They meant another handler could take him. They meant I would return. He looked into my eyes. I could not tell whether he believed that last part. A technician led him through the double doors. I stood watching until he disappeared. Without Echo beside me, the hallway felt too open. Evelyn touched my arm. He will be all right. I have heard that before. You are thinking about your friend. I looked at her. How do you know? Samuel told me why you left the Navy. He had no right. He was trying to understand you. He could have asked. Yes. She did not defend him. That was why I could listen to her. My phone rang. Mara, I answered. Did they take the evidence? No. Federal agents have it. Her voice was tight. What happened? Silas reported that I stole classified records and assaulted archive workers. The workers attacked us, I know. Do the agents? They are interviewing everyone. Where are you? Federal field office. Are you detained? Not officially. A pause followed. Jonah, Silas knows we found the survey. How? One of the attackers called him before the fire alarm. Then he knows the evidence is beyond his reach. Most of it. The way she said it made my skin cold. What was missing? The original recordings. I have 11 tapes. And the final statement? Samuel's digital recorder was damaged. The survey references a duplicate statement transmitted from the orchard. I remembered the homemade system beneath the cider house. The smashed transmitter, the warning card. If the room is breached, turn the red switch. Wait for 3 tones. Speak clearly. The backup transmission, I said. Where does it go? Several receivers. The sheriff. A newspaper. Perhaps a federal office. Did it ever send? I do not know. Silas will assume it can. I looked through the hospital window at the morning traffic. He will return to the orchard. Do not go there alone. Where is Sheriff Rusk? He returned to Briar Glen before dawn. With Silas, no one knows. Evelyn was listening. My grandson, she said. I covered the phone. What? He returns from camp this afternoon. The school bus stops near the Orchard Road. I checked the clock. We had lost track of the hours. What is his name? Noel. 10. Spoke into the phone. Mara, Silas threatened Evelyn through her grandson. I will contact the school. Do not use county dispatch. I understand. The call ended. Evelyn tried Noah's school. No answer. She called his teacher voicemail. The science camp had ended early because of weather damage near Boone. The children were already traveling home. Evelyn's hands began to shake. We have to go. Echo cannot leave. You stay with him. I will take a taxi. You are not going alone. I found the veterinarian. Echo was resting beneath observation. His vital signs were stable. I asked whether he could travel. The answer, sir, was immediate. No. I looked through the glass. Echo lay on a padded mat with his eyes closed. A bandage wrapped his lower jaw. His breathing was slow. Safe. For the first time since we arrived in Tennessee, he was somewhere no one expected him to fight. I left without waking him. That decision haunted me before I reached the parking lot. Evelyn and I took her vehicle, which Patricia had helped arrange through a friend. The drive back to Briar Glen took nearly an hour. Mara called twice. The school bus could not be reached. A storm had damaged cellular service along the mountain route. The sheriff's office claimed it had sent a deputy to meet the children. Neither of us trusted that claim. Smoke from the cider house still hung above the orchard when we reached the county road. The school bus stood near the gate. Its doors were open. No children were inside. The driver sat beside the road with blood on his forehead. Evelyn ran to him. Where is Noah? The driver looked confused. A man from the Veterans Foundation met us.
What man?
He said the road was unsafe after the fire. He moved the children to the church bus. All of them? The driver struggled to focus. I think so. Evelyn gripped his shoulders. Was Noah with them? The driver closed his eyes. He ran toward the orchard. Why? He said he saw your truck. Evelyn's vehicle was still at her house. Noah had seen a truck that looked like hers, a lure. I looked uphill. Fresh tire tracks crossed the gate and entered the orchard. Silas had brought the boy onto the property. Evelyn started running. I caught her. You stay with the driver. He is my grandson, and I will bring him back. You do not have Echo. The word struck harder than she intended. She saw it. I am sorry. She is right, a voice behind me said. Sheriff Rusk stood beside his vehicle. I had not heard him arrive. His hand rested near his holster. Where is the deputy you sent? I asked. I sent no deputy. Your office told Mara otherwise. Rusk looked toward the orchard. Then someone used my dispatch credentials. Silas, the sheriff's jaw tightened. I spent 30 years believing his foundation saved this county. Belief is not evidence. No, he removed his badge and stared at it for a moment. Neither is a badge. He handed Evelyn his radio. Call the state police directly. Tell them an officer needs immediate assistance. You are coming with me? I asked. Rusk drew his weapon. I should have done that years ago. We entered the orchard on foot. The tire tracks led toward the western field. Wind moved through the dead trees. The smell reached us before the fire appeared. Gasoline. Sheriff Rusk noticed it too. We began to run. Flames rose beyond the lower ridge, not from the ruined cider house. From the dry grass between the apple rows, Silas had set the orchard itself on fire. Wind drove the flames uphill, spreading them from tree to tree. Black smoke rolled across the property. A dark truck stood near the irrigation shed. Its driver's door was open. No sign of Silas, no sign of Noah. Then I heard a child calling through the smoke. Grandma. The voice came from the cider house. I ran toward it. Rusk followed. The stone building had survived the first fire, but flames now surrounded it from 3 sides. A small figure stood behind the broken window. Noah. He struck the glass with both hands. Help me. I reached the door. A steel chain had been wrapped through the handles. Silas had locked him inside. Rusk fired at the chain. The bullet struck metal and ricocheted into the stone. "Stop!" I shouted. The chain was too thick. I looked through the window. Noah coughed inside the smoke. "Get low," I called. "Stay near the floor. I cannot find the door. Follow my voice." The fire moved closer. A vehicle engine started behind us. Silas's truck rolled from the irrigation shed. He sat behind the wheel. For one moment our eyes met through the smoke. He held a black case on the passenger's seat. My father's tapes. Silas must have taken them from my truck while we were inside the archive. He had the original recordings, the evidence federal investigators needed, the truth about every family he had robbed. He reversed toward the Orchard Road. Sheriff Rusk aimed his weapon. Silas drove behind a wall of flame. The sheriff could chase him. I could chase him. We might recover the tapes before he destroyed them. Then Noah screamed inside the cider house. The choice returned. The child or the evidence, the life in front of me or the truth that could save hundreds later. For most of my life I had believed leadership meant making the impossible choice quickly. That morning I understood something Aaron had tried to teach me. A life was not one side of a calculation. A life was the reason the calculation existed. "Let him go," I told Rusk. The sheriff lowered his weapon. Silas disappeared down the Orchard Road with the evidence. I wrapped my hands around Tanchain and pulled. The metal cut into my palms. It did not move. Smoke thickened around us. Noah's coughing weakened. Then, somewhere beyond the flames, I heard a familiar bark. Deep, sharp, determined. Echo came running through the smoke. The veterinarian's bandage still wrapped his jaw. A torn lead dragged behind him. He should have been lying in the hospital. He should not have been able to find us. But Echo had followed our scent home, and now he was staring at the locked cider house as if the entire mountain had given him one final mission. Echo stood in the smoke with a torn lead dragging behind him. His body swayed. The white bandage beneath his jaw had turned gray from ash, and every breath seemed to cost him more than the one before. But his eyes remained fixed on the chained cider house. On the child trapped inside. "Echo," I said, "you should not be here." He looked at me as though my opinion no longer mattered. Then he lowered his nose to the ground. The fire moved uphill through the dry orchard grass. Flames climbed the dead apple trees and raced from branch to branch. Burning bark fell around us in glowing pieces. Sheriff Rusk pulled his coat across his mouth. "We have less than 2 minutes before the roof catches again." Through the broken window, Noah coughed. "I cannot see," he cried. "Stay low," I shouted. "Keep talking to me. I am scared." "I know. Listen to my voice." Echo moved away from the chained doors. At first I thought he was confused from the concussion. Then he began following the cider house wall toward the creek. His nose stayed close to the stones. He stopped beside the remains of the collapsed water wheel and scratched at a pile of wet leaves. I remembered the corridor beneath the building, the copper pipes, the old water channels. The bunker had not been built as a sealed room. Samuel needed ventilation and an emergency exit. Echo had found its scent. I ran to him and pulled away the leaves. Behind them was an iron grate set into the foundation. Water flowed through the lower half of it, carrying ash toward the creek. The grate was rusted, but the hinges remained solid. Rusk knelt beside me. "Drainage tunnel? Old mill channel. Large enough for a man? We are about to find out." I wrapped both hands around the bars and pulled. Nothing moved. Rusk found a broken fence post and wedged it between the grate and the stone. We pushed together. Metal screamed. One hinge tore free. The grate opened several inches. Not enough. Noah coughed again inside the building. The sound was weaker. Echo pressed his shoulder against the bars. "Back," I ordered. He ignored me. He pushed beside us, injured legs trembling beneath him. The second hinge snapped. The grate fell outward into the creek. Black water rushed around our boots. The opening beyond was low and narrow. Smoke drifted from it. Rusk looked at me. "I will go." "You are broader than I am. That is not the only reason." "I know." The sheriff's face was streaked with soot. He looked older than he had outside the diner, older than he had when he handed Evelyn his radio. "I trusted Silas," he said. "That boy is in there because men like me kept trusting him." "Then help me keep the exit open." I lowered myself into the channel. Echo came after me. I blocked him with one arm. "No." He tried to push past. "You cannot breathe in there." His amber eyes held mine. Neither could Noah. Echo knew that. I removed my wet overshirt and wrapped it loosely around the dog's muzzle and neck. leaving enough space for him to breathe. "You stay behind me," he stepped forward. I crawled into the darkness. The channel was barely 3 feet high. Cold water covered my hands and knees. The stone ceiling pressed close above my back. Smoke thickened as we moved deeper. Echo's claws scraped behind me. Every few feet he stopped to cough. Each time I considered turning him around. Each time Noah's voice came faintly through the stone. "Grandma." We kept moving. The channel ended at a wooden barrier beneath the cider house floor. Heat radiated through it. I pushed with one shoulder. The wood held. Echo squeezed beside me and sniffed the edges. He pawed at the lower right corner. A narrow latch was hidden there. Samuel's emergency exits never opened where a frightened man expected them to. They opened where a patient man searched. I released the latch. The barrier fell inward. Smoke poured into the tunnel. I climbed through and found myself beneath the old apple press. The room above was almost impossible to see. Fire had entered through the western windows and was climbing the interior wall. The stone floor remained mostly clear, but burning beams had fallen across the main doorway. Noah was crouched near a row of overturned barrels. He had pulled his shirt over his mouth. "Jonah, I am here." I crawled toward him. Echo emerged from the tunnel and moved to Noah's side. The boy threw both arms around the German shepherd. "You came back." Echo, Noah's fear broke open. He began to cry. I placed my hands on his shoulders. "Look at me," he tried. His eyes streamed from the smoke. "We are leaving through a water tunnel. You will stay behind Echo. Keep one hand on his harness and follow him no matter what you hear." "What about you?" "I will be behind you." A heavy beam cracked above us. Sparks fell across the floor. Echo moved toward the tunnel entrance. Noah held his harness. I guided the boy down. The moment his knees touched the water, panic took him. "It is too small. You can do this." "I cannot." "Yes, you can." "I cannot breathe." I knew that feeling. A narrow room. A low ceiling. Air that seemed to disappear because fear consumed it before the lungs could. I had spent years avoiding enclosed spaces for the same reason. "Listen to Echo," I said. The dog's breathing was rough but steady. In, out, in, out. "Match him," I told Noah. "One breath for every breath he takes." Noah watched Echo's ribs. He inhaled, then exhaled. Again. Echo crawled forward. Noah followed. I entered behind. The fire roared through the room we had left. The tunnel seemed narrower on the way out. Smoke followed us along the ceiling. Halfway through, Echo stopped. Noah pressed against him. "What happened?" I reached past the boy. Echo's back legs had collapsed. He tried to rise. They slid beneath him. The concussion, the smoke, and the run from the animal hospital had taken what strength remained. "Echo," I whispered. He turned his head toward me. His eyes were clear. His body simply could not continue. The tunnel was too narrow for me to pass Noah and lift the dog. We could not turn around. Heat grew behind us. Rusk shouted from the opening ahead. "Jonah, we are here. What is wrong?" "Echo is down." Noah tightened both hands around the harness. "I can pull him." "He is too heavy." The boy looked back at me. "I can help." A child who had been locked inside a burning building was trying to save the dog who came for him. I reached beneath Echo's hindquarters. Noah pulled the harness. "Together," I said. We moved the dog 1 foot, then another. Echo tried to use his front legs. Water carried some of his weight, but not enough. My shoulders scraped the stone walls. Smoke burned my lungs. The roar behind us grew louder. Again I said. Noah pulled. I pushed. Echo crawled. The darkness ahead slowly changed. Gray light appeared beyond Rusk's silhouette. His arms reached into the tunnel. He caught Noah first and lifted him into the creek. Then he reached for Echo's harness. I pushed with everything I had left. The dog slid through the opening. Rusk dragged him into the water. I followed as the cider house roof collapsed. The sound shook the ground. Fire burst through the upper windows. For several seconds, I lay in the creek with cold water moving around my face. Then I heard Noah crying for his grandmother. I rose. Evelyn ran down the hill through the smoke. She fell to her knees and pulled her grandson against her. Russ called for medical help over the radio. State police sirens sounded beyond the orchard gate. Firefighters moved toward us carrying oxygen tanks and stretchers. I knelt beside Echo. He lay on his side in the creek. His eyes were closed. Echo, nothing. I pressed my hand against his ribs. No movement. I removed the wet cloth from his muzzle and opened his mouth. Ash darkened his tongue. My training took over. I cleared his airway, extended his neck, and breathed into his nose. Once, twice I pressed both hands against his chest. Come on, partner. No response. The creek disappeared. The orchard disappeared. I was back beside Aaron Bell on a mountain covered in dust. My hands pressed against his chest while the helicopter fought the wind. Someone told me he was gone. I refused to believe it. I had carried that refusal home. For years, I believed that if I had moved faster, chosen better, or fought harder, Aaron would have opened his eyes. Now Echo lay beneath my hands, the last member of my team, the one soul who had never asked me to explain the darkness inside my head. Not you, I whispered. I breathed into his nose again, then pressed his chest. You brought me home. Nothing. You do not get to leave me here. I pressed again. Echo coughed. Water and black mucus spilled from his mouth. He dragged in one ragged breath, then another. His eyes opened halfway. I lowered my forehead against his. I have you. His tail moved once in the water. It was barely a movement. It was enough. The animal hospital veterinarian reached us with the emergency crew. They placed Echo on a stretcher and fitted an oxygen mask over his muzzle. He resisted until I took his paw. I am going with you. Only then did he become still. Before they carried him uphill, Sheriff Rusk approached me. Silas's truck had been found near the southern bridge. Empty, the black case was gone. He is on foot, Rusk said. State police have closed the roads. He knows this land. So do you. I looked toward the burning orchard, the old railway trail. Rusk nodded. It reaches the county line. He will use the abandoned rail tunnel to cross the ridge. The sheriff called the information over his radio. I started to follow. Then Echo made a weak sound from the stretcher. I stopped. Silas was escaping with the recordings. Every instinct trained into me said to pursue him. Finish the mission. Recover the evidence. Do not give the enemy time to disappear. But Echo needed me. Noah needed Evelyn. The fire crews needed clear roads. The federal agents already had my father's survey, the bank records, and the sworn statement. Silas had committed arson, abduction, assault, and attempted murder in front of witnesses. The tapes mattered, but they were no longer worth abandoning another wounded member of my team. State police can take the tunnel, I told Rusk. You are sure? No. I climbed into the veterinary vehicle beside Echo, but I know where I belong. Silas Vane did not reach the county line. He emerged from the old railway tunnel shortly after noon and found nearly 50 people waiting on the other side. Not police officers, farmers, retired soldiers, volunteer firefighters, people whose hospital bills Silas had paid, people whose roofs he had repaired, people whose gratitude he had used as a shield. Clara Jennings had heard about Noah. Colin, the young firefighter, had told the town he smelled gasoline on Silas before the fire began. Patricia Nolan had called families named in the survey records. Word traveled through Briar Glen faster than Silas could run. He stepped from the tunnel carrying the black case and found the community he controlled standing between him and the road. No one attacked him. No one needed to. They simply refused to move. State police arrived minutes later. Silas placed the case on the ground and raised his hands. The man who had spent decades hiding behind other people's trust was finally defeated when those people stopped lending it to him. The recordings survived. One tape had been damaged by water, but the others remained clear. My father's voice identified fraudulent transfers, false charities, secret payments, and the names of county officials who had helped Silas bury complaints. The federal survey contained copies of bank transactions and original contracts. Evelyn's testimony connected the documents to the families Silas had targeted. Mara's body camera had captured the attack inside the archive. The school bus driver identified the man who took Noah, and Noah remembered Silas locking the cider house doors. Sheriff Rusk resigned before the state investigation ended. He was not charged with fraud, but he admitted ignoring warnings because Silas made the county look prosperous. Mara became acting sheriff. Her first order was to remove every Foundation employee from County Dispatch XS. Her second was to reopen every disputed property transfer connected to Silas. The investigation lasted more than a year. Silas Vane was convicted of conspiracy, fraud, arson, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Several officials accepted plea agreements. Land was returned. Debts were canceled. Fritz families who had been told they were confused, old, or ungrateful finally heard a judge say they had been telling the truth. Echo spent 4 days beneath veterinary observation. Smoke had damaged his lungs, and the kick at the archive had worsened his concussion. On the second night, his breathing became unstable. I sat beside his enclosure until morning. The staff brought me a chair, but I did not use it. I remained on the floor with one hand through the bars. Whenever Echo woke, his paw found mine. On the 4th morning he stood. His legs shook. He took one step, then another. He walked directly to me and pressed his head against my chest. The veterinarian told me his working days were over. No tracking through smoke, no long runs, no impact training. No more missions. I looked at Echo. He looked back. "We have heard that before," I said, but this time I meant to obey. 2 weeks later, a federal marshal named Robert Larkin came to the orchard. He was 81 years old and walked with a polished wooden cane. He carried a sealed package beneath one arm. We sat on the farmhouse porch while spring rain moved through the apple trees. Echo lay between us beneath a blanket. Larkin looked across the damaged orchard. "Your father loved this place. You knew him? For 23 years. The number hurt. Then you knew where he was, while I believed he had abandoned us. Did he ask about me every time we spoke? That is not the same as calling." No, Larkin did not offer an excuse. I respected him for that. "What happened after the river?" "Silas's men forced your father's truck off the road. Thomas escaped through the water. A federal investigator found him before Silas did." Why witness protection? He had evidence against a network larger than one county. Land fraud, money laundering, false veterans charities. Silas was one part of it. Why did the case fail? Documents disappeared. Witnesses changed their testimony. Officials were compromised, and my father remained hidden. He was told contact with his family could lead Silas back to him. My mother died believing he ran. Larkin looked down. Thomas learned about her death 6 months later. What did he do? He stopped speaking for almost a week. Anger rose inside me. He could have come home after that. Yes, the marshal's honesty cut deeper than a defense would have. Why did he not fear shame then time? Larkin placed the sealed package in my hands. "Your father protected you at first. Later he hid from what returning would require him to face. I thought of the apartments I had left, the calls I had ignored, the people I had pushed away, because explaining myself felt harder than disappearing. My father and I had worn different uniforms, but fear had given us the same orders." "When did he die?" I asked. 6 years ago, cancer." The answer closed a door I had not realized I still hoped to open. I stared across the orchard. Echo lifted his head and rested it on my knee. "Did he leave this?" Larkin nodded. He recorded after his diagnosis. Inside the package was a small audio player. I pressed the button. My father's voice came through the speaker. "Older now. Fragile. Jonah, I have imagined this conversation so many times that I no longer know which words are true and which ones are only the words I wish I had been brave enough to say. I closed my eyes. I did not leave because I stopped loving you. I stayed away because I was afraid my return would put you in danger. Later, when the danger had changed, I stayed away because I was ashamed." The recording paused. "I cannot ask you to forgive that. A father does not earn forgiveness merely by explaining the wound he caused." Echo's breathing remained steady beside me. "I followed your Navy career whenever I could. I saw photographs of you with your team. I saw the dog, too. You looked like a man protecting everyone except himself." My throat tightened. "I hope you learned something I never did. Coming home is not a place. It is an act of courage repeated every day." My father drew a slow breath. "If Samuel gives you the orchard, do not keep it because it belonged to us. Keep it only if you can make it belong to something better." The recording ended. I sat on the porch until the rain stopped. I did not forgive my father that day. Forgiveness was not a door I could open with one key. But I stopped believing his absence meant I was unworthy of being loved. That was enough for a beginning. The western field was badly damaged by fire. Nearly a third of the apple trees had to be removed. Silas's foundation offered no money for repairs because the government had frozen its accounts. The people of Briar Glen came anyway. Clara brought food. Colin and the volunteer firefighters cleared burned wood. Patricia helped families organize their recovered deeds. Evelyn supervised everyone from a folding chair and complained whenever we worked too slowly. Noah followed Echo everywhere. He read books beside him when the dog tired. He learned how to clean the bandage beneath Echo's jaw. At night, he slept in the farmhouse guest room until Evelyn's home was repaired. I completed the 30 days required by Samuel's will. Then Daniel Mercer returned with the transfer documents. "You can sell now," he said. I looked through the farmhouse window. Echo was asleep on the porch. Noah sat beside him carving a whistle from an apple branch. Veterans from 3 counties were planting young trees in the western field. Some walked with canes, some carried scars no one could see. One man had brought an elderly Labrador that had served with a police department. Another had brought a retired military shepherd who refused to enter buildings. Neither dog was asked to perform. Neither veteran was asked to explain. They simply worked among the trees. "I am not selling," I said. The orchard reopened the following autumn. We did not call it a foundation. That word had been used too carelessly in Briar Glen. We called it Reed Orchard Homecoming. Older veterans came for quiet weekends. Retired working dogs came with them. There were no speeches about fixing broken people. No one there was broken, wounded perhaps, tired, changed, but not broken. We planted trees, repaired fences, pressed cider, and walked the mountain trails at whatever pace our bodies allowed. Some men talked, others did not. The dogs never required either. Echo became the orchard's guardian. He could no longer run far, but he knew every person who entered the gate. Each morning he walked slowly to the oldest apple tree, the one where Samuel had buried his hound many years before. Then he sat facing the cider house. We rebuilt it with stone from the original walls. The bunker remained beneath it, but we removed the locks. Inside, we created an archive for every family whose land had been returned. Their stories were recorded in their own voices. No hidden signatures. No secret agreements. No powerful man deciding which truth deserved to survive. One evening, nearly 2 years after the fire, I sat beside Echo on the hillside. The apple trees below us were heavy with red fruit. Noah and Evelyn walked near the creek. Mara's patrol vehicle was parked beside the farmhouse. Laughter came from the cider house, where veterans were teaching children how the old press worked. Echo rested his gray muzzle across my boot. "You found the door," I told him. His tail moved through the grass. I once thought that was the miracle. A German shepherd discovering a hidden room beneath an abandoned building. But the real door was not beneath the cider house. It was inside me. Echo had spent years standing beside it, waiting for me to stop guarding it, waiting for me to understand that surviving was not the same as living. The orchard did not erase the war. It did not bring Aaron back. It did not return the years my father lost or undo the choices Samuel made. Healing did not work that way. Healing was quieter. It was Noah laughing beside the creek. It was Evelyn holding the deed to land that belonged to her again. It was an old veteran sleeping through the night because a retired dog lay beside his bed. It was waking before dawn and realizing I wanted to see another day. I placed my hand against Echo's neck. "You brought me home, partner." He closed his eyes. Below us, the rebuilt cider house caught the final light of evening. Its stone walls glowed gold between the apple trees. No secrets waited beneath its floor anymore, only names, only voices, only the truth. And for the first time in my life, I was no longer afraid of what the truth might ask me to become. Perhaps that is the lesson Echo left with me. Home is not a place where the past can no longer find us. Home is the place where we finally become brave enough to face that past without standing alone. Some wounds never disappear completely. But with loyalty, patience, and one faithful soul beside us, those wounds do not have to decide how the rest of our lives will be lived. Thank you for spending this time with Jonah and Echo. Should this story remind you of someone who stayed beside you during a difficult season, share their memory in the comments. And please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you will not miss the next story in our collection of veterans, loyal dogs, courage, and second chances. Your quiet support gives us the motivation to keep telling stories that honor the bonds that never abandon us.